OPB Podcasts.
It's OPB Politics Now for Thursday, April 30th. Ballots should be arriving any day now, and in a matter of weeks, we will know who will be facing Democratic Governor Tina Kotek in the November election. It's one of the more competitive GOP primaries we've seen in recent years, and we're going to take a deep dive into each of the top candidates. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
And I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
Dirk, welcome.
Thank you.
It's been 4 years since Christine Drazan ran against Governor Tina Kotek. 4 long years. Drazan swears that this time is different. If she's given a chance to run against Kotek again, it will be a rematch unlike the one before.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Drazan, like every other candidate, I guess, in the GOP primary, is selling herself as the Republican who is most likely to beat Governor Kotek in November. I think that has led to an obvious criticism, which is that she already lost to Kotek once, just 4 years ago. Drazan, though, this time, I mean, she says that is just not the correct way to think of this race. Here is some of that.
For people that look at it now and say this is a repeat of that, it's not. It's a different time. The state's in a different place. The dynamics are different. I personally am different. I don't think there's a way to go through that experience and not be changed by it, galvanized.
So, let's go through some history. So Drazan was a state representative, a big foe of Kotek when Kotek was House Speaker. She stepped down from her House seat to run for governor in 2022. And so was sort of out of the political game after she lost that race. She comes roaring back in 24, gets her old House seat back, immediately gets her House leader, her role as House Minority Leader back, and then makes the jump over to the Senate when Senator Daniel Bonham goes on to join the Trump administration and leaves his seat vacant. Drazan gets that seat. So she's in the Senate. She can fundraise without any problem during the legislative session this year. A lot has happened, I guess is what I'm saying, in the last 4 years. But one obvious huge difference, besides what she's saying about, she's a different person, and is that there's not a viable third candidate. We have talked so much on the podcast about this, but the 2022 race included Betsy Johnson, that former Democratic state senator who was really pursuing some of the same support from groups that Drazan was also looking for. I think Drazan sees that as really a distraction. I mean, it turned out Betsy Johnson was not a viable candidate, did not really stand a chance to actually win the 2022 race, but they were going for some of the same endorsements. Betsy was getting some of the same money that Drazan believes she could have used to more effectively go after Kotek. So yes, long way of saying she thinks this time's different.
I think she also told you that this time around she can run against Kotek's actual record as governor, which is true. And, by most accounts, Kotek's record of her first 4 years in office has not been incredibly amazing. I mean, by a lot of metrics, the state isn't that much better off.
Sure. Yes, we talked about this.
So I don't know. At the same time, though, it's been 4 decades since Oregonians have elected a Republican to sit in Mahonia. How much does it matter that the Democratic governor's record seems to be sort of struggling?
Right. I mean, as usual, you were asking me an unfair question that asked me to divine the future. I mean, I really do think that is a question that is going to have to wait for the November general. I think the race that's going to shape up in that November general is a question of Kotek's record versus President Trump's record, right? Democrats will link any candidate that advances in this primary to the unpopular president, suggests that Oregon is going to be really more vulnerable to Trump policies with a Republican in office. You can count on that. But the GOP candidate is going to be able to point to all these things, as you're mentioning, that Kotek has prioritized but not fixed. Homelessness is still on the rise in Oregon. The state has been permitting fewer housing units than before she took office. Unemployment here is some of the highest in the country. That, I believe, will resonate with at least some voters. Here is how Drazan says she plans to prosecute this case.
And the conversation with voters is not, I don't like Tina Kotek. The conversation with voters is, she isn't doing the job. She's shown she can't do the job. And I can promise you she doesn't deserve your vote to continue to fail doing the job.
So clearly she is ready to have that discussion. First, she's got to get through this primary. I think it is less clear, though, that Drazen is ready to have a discussion about where she agrees with President Trump and where she doesn't. In Oregon, that is always the big trick, or has been since 2016 for Republicans, is trying to show some independence that is going to woo moderates while at the same time making sure you have the Republican base coming with you. But we've talked a lot about the general. Back to the GOP primary. One thing I wonder about, I think we haven't talked a ton about yet in this race, is how abortion rights are going to factor in. You and I have debated actually a bit about who might have the best chance against Kotek out of this race. And one thing that Chris Dudley, the former trailblazer, arguably had in his corner coming into this is this more moderate stance on abortion. He said, he ran as a pro-choice candidate before, and the thinking was that helps with the folks you have to get in a general election. But that's not necessarily the case anymore, right? He has muddied the waters a bit. He
did last week. Like you said, he has stated pretty clearly on video that he was pro-choice, or that, he supported a person's right to choose for themselves whether they were going to have an abortion. And then last week, his campaign sent out a text message where it said he was personally anti-abortion, but that he didn't think it was a decision that the government should be making. And then he said, that's always been his position. Here's what he told me.
Well, personally, I'm pro-life, and I've taken I have more libertarian views towards social issues. I am opposed to late-term abortions. I believe in promoting life. I want adoption. I think those decisions should be made by families, not the government.
So this came after Oregon Right to Life, which is the leading anti-abortion group in the state, and arguably pretty persuasive in conservative circles.
Yeah, they have a long mailing list. They are able to get the word out.
Yes, and it came right after they endorsed Drazen and Ed Deal. And this is just one of those issues that can surface for candidates that can make it very difficult to win the primary, where conservative voters like to see candidates who are anti-abortion, and yet not have this issue really haunt them in the general election, where they need to appeal to more moderates. But in 2018, when Republican Newt Buehler ran against Governor Kate Brown, he managed to win the primary, while still being pretty clear that he believed reproductive health care were decisions that should be left up to individuals. So it is possible to do it. And like you said, when Chris Dudley ran against Kitzhaber in 2010, it seemed it was like he was pretty clearly in that camp. But now he's muddied the waters, and it seems like he's really trying to have it both ways,
Absolutely.
Which I think is just leaving voters with a sense of they don't really know what to think.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that muddying the waters, flip-flopping, as his opponents will call it, is going to be effective for him. And this has always been the big challenge for him ever since he announced. He has two viable candidates, at least, maybe three or four, depending on how you look at it, in this race that are going to hold him on these views, and him not really seeming to take a very clear stand. Not helpful. He has always been the candidate that I think Democrats, when you talk to Democrats about this race, at least I have gotten the sense that the person they would least likely to see in the general is Chris Dudley. There is this vibe about him. He came really, really close in 2010. Maybe he could really give us a race this time. That was the case some weeks ago. I am just not sure that is as much the case these days. The air of really strong candidate that I think Dudley came into this race with, and the Phil Knight money maybe lent him, has been dimming a little bit in my view.
Yeah, I have heard that from a lot of people who I think, were hopeful that he was going to finally be this person who could break this 4-decade-plus losing streak that the Republicans have in this race. But he just has seemingly failed to gain momentum. The polling we have seen, there's not a lot, but it certainly has him trailing Drazen. On the debate stage, he comes off as much less comfortable than she does. I just think he's had a harder time straying from his talking points and drilling down into specifics.
Yeah.
Granted, she's been in politics. She hasn't left. She's become very polished and practiced in this arena, where he's had a bit of a hiatus.
And that's his selling point, right? He's trying to say, I'm this outsider. I'm bringing an MBA mind to this.
And again, because he got so close to beating John Kitzhaber in 2010, and he has, at least some people thought he had name recognition from being a former Portland trailblazer, and because he seemed to be more moderate. All of these things seem to be in his favor, but it doesn't really appear yet to be coalescing in any sort of noticeable momentum.
I mean, you were telling me today you were having a discussion with a family member who was like, I thought I liked this Chris Dudley person, but where has he been?
Yes, it's true. In the parking lot right outside OPB office, my grandmother, 91 years old, called me and said, I see Christine Drazen on Fox all the time. Where's Dudley? So, yeah.
There you go.
And she's not the only one I've talked to, okay? This isn't a podcast about my grandma. Okay, the other thing here is that it's been hard at times. I mean, we wrote a whole story about this after the first debate/forum where they were at, that it's not totally clear that they have the leading candidates have these huge policy differences. Like, they're all hitting similar themes: improving affordability, lowering taxes, fixing the schools. And of course, some of the candidates lean slightly more conservative than the others, but the voters are really left here to analyze the backgrounds and their personalities on themselves.
Yeah, to the extent that voters are doing any deep analysis. I mean, look, on one level, as I've said, all the candidates are arguing that the big question here is who can beat Kotek in November, and all of them are making this unique case for why they are that person. I don't know whether voters are driven entirely by that consideration or are more about these other factors you're talking about, the vibes, the personalities, the polish. Like I mentioned, Dudley is offering himself as this outsider who's been a businessman and can bring this non-Salem eye to these problems. Does that resonate, right? Drazen is saying she's the candidate with the political chops and the experience to really be effective as governor day one. I think you're right. She's been more polished than Dudley, so maybe people are responding to that. But there are also some who say she's just not conservative enough. And then you get to Ed Deal's candidacy, which seems, I think more tooled to the grassroots Republican base. That's the lane that he seems to want to pursue. To your point, though, we asked all the candidates, or at least the top four candidates, where they disagree. And I don't know about you, Lauren. The folks I talked to were not able to give me a ton of variance between themselves. I mean, abortion is the clear, obvious thing with Dudley's history, and even that didn't come up that much. But it's just, they agree. They largely agree. They want to do the same basic stuff.
Well, let's pivot to Ed no tax deal, because I think Dudley and Drazen have sort of, like we've mentioned, been the front runners the most of this race.
At least they have the most. I mean, we can get to polling in a second. They have the most money. It's not clear that Dudley is a front runner at this point, and we can get to that. But yeah.
I mean, they came into the race with that status.
Yes,
they had the most name recognition and the most money.
Yep.
But Ed Deal has had clear moments of momentum.
I mean, he sees a real path for himself in this race. He is the least known person of these three, at least. He's a 2-term state representative. He was a business owner for a long time. He has, I think, carved out a name for himself as a pretty fiery conservative within the House. He's weighed really, really far into gender affirming care stuff that he's opposed. And he's a pretty reliable conservative. I think he's on the more conservative wing of the House Republicans. But you're right. I mean, he's got juice primarily from being the guy who effectively killed the gas tax increase that was passed by Governor Kotek. He led this campaign that really successfully collected all these signatures. Now that those gas tax increases are on the ballot in this election, they're going to fail almost certainly. So he is really riding that. Here's how he puts sort of that effect.
The referendum did two things. I think it showed Oregonians how I can lead and rally and organize and get big things done. And I've solved problems for a living my entire career, and I get results. But it also showed that we have a governor that really is just comfortable openly defying the will of her own citizens.
Yeah, what he's saying there is, she should have known that people really, really didn't want these tax increases. We showed that, so she's going against the people. I mean, that is the big flashy selling point here. Deal, I will say, though, also sees himself as a kind of unifier in a way. You're right, branded himself as Ed No Tax Deal. He wears shirts that say Ed No Tax Deal. But he thinks that no tax theme resonates far more broadly than just the GOP base. Here is how he describes it.
I'm focused on the issues that, for the first time, and I think in a long time, are really uniting us as Oregonians and crossing that urban-rural divide, which is taxes. Everybody's fed up with taxes. We're shedding private sector jobs. Look at Portland. We're in a doom loop. Portland's complaining about a lot of things that the rest of the state's been complaining about for a while. A failing education system, a homelessness problem that's not getting any better, and state agencies that are frankly unaccountable.
Deal thinks this message, as he's saying, can really resonate. The problem, though, and we have talked about this repeatedly, is he just doesn't have a lot of money to get that message out to people. He's raised, I checked this morning, he's reported less than $700,000 this election cycle. I mean, both Dudley and Drazen are over $2 million. He has loaned himself almost $200,000. The knock-on deal is that he just is not going to be able to get people to understand where he's coming from, who he is, in enough time to really make a dent. If he did have that $1 million, $2 million, I think a lot of people think he could really make some waves in this race. But as things stand now, it's just not happening.
I sort of wonder if he'll be one of those candidates that we'll see again. Like, he's using this as a way to really get his name out there a little bit. And I mean, I'm sure he thinks he can win, but I think there's a long-term strategy as well.
Yeah, I think he thinks he can win. Things can still change, right? People haven't voted. As things stand right now, he probably isn't favored to win. I think we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, these races do that. You run a statewide campaign, like, you might be back doing some stuff later. We should get to a fourth person who we talked to, who I think shown some real familiarity, at least with the issues, and when we've seen them on the stage, and that is Marion County Commissioner Danielle Bethel. She is a true long shot. You noted in a mini profile today. I think she owns that, but she is managing to surprise people.
Yeah, I mean, she's actually been in the race the longest.
Yep.
But she is definitely the least well known. She doesn't have the campaign cash to get her name out there. But yeah, I mean, in the very first forum, she surprised people because she was specific. Her answers were not those like sort of pat talking points that we're accustomed to candidates using. She was real. And she is able to be specific because she's currently in a role where at least she feels like she does a lot of the governing work that is required by the governor, but on a much smaller scale. So here's her voice.
Well, I'm literally delivering real life services to Oregonians today successfully, reducing the homeless population, increasing access for thriving businesses in our county, working with rural businesses in their growth. I'm actually doing the governing of a large jurisdiction, similar to the governor would if she was to do the job the way I think she should do the job.
So, yeah, I mean, she might be another candidate that, again, we see pop back up. It's unlikely that this is her race.
Yes.
But also her background's pretty compelling as well. I should mention she talked a lot to me about her childhood. She grew up pretty poor. She has a mother with mental illness, and she was able to articulate some specific visions when it came to improving behavioral health and homelessness. And I just think she'll probably be somebody that we'll see again.
Yeah, we talked about this. I mean, after they had their debate, she really was digging into the weeds in a way that I wasn't sure was always going to register with folks, but clearly demonstrating some very specific knowledge, as you're saying, about the policies and some of the challenges the state faces.
I think when we were here a couple of weeks ago, we made mention that there had been barely any polling, or there had been no polling.
Right.
But now we have some.
We do.
We do. So the results overall, I'm not sure I would really call them surprising, but they give us, a better idea about the shape of the race.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, it's surprising in one way because, as we have talked about, coming into this, Dudley's coming in with $1 million in Phil Knight money and some of the heft of that 2010 race. Both of the polls we've seen really, really show that this is Drazen's race to lose at this point. So we got one just this week, I think, from Hoffman Research. It was actually commissioned by a rival podcast, the folks at Crosstabs, which is run by a couple of Republican operatives. But that poll is the most recent. It shows Christine Drazen with 35% of support. Ed Deal in second with 18%, so about half that. And then Chris Dudley in third with 14%. So trailing Deal in that poll despite his fundraising advantages. And about 25% are undecided there. The poll before that kind of comes up with the same results. It was like 31% Drazen, 16% Ed Deal, 15% Dudley. So again, Dudley is coming in behind. I mean, the people that are looking at these polls and trying to analyze them, there's a lot we could get into about like where support is the strongest and amongst which groups. But I think it just really tells a tale of Drazen sort of dominating this race. There's a question of whether she has maximized the support and maybe she can't go any higher than that, but we are just not really seeing these other two candidates bridging the gap at this point. And when pollsters ask, this is sort of the top line, but when pollsters are asking in both these polls, okay, there are a lot of people that aren't decided, but if you had to decide, if you absolutely had to, Drazen even gets more. So she's showing that she is the candidate to beat at this point. And something really needs to change for that to change.
She also nabbed the editorial endorsements of both the Willamette Week and the Oregonian, I believe. Yeah,
and neither of those editorial boards had favorable things at all to say about Chris Dudley. I think both of them slammed him pretty hard. So he is feeling it. Actually, we were watching the debate. There was a debate at the Dorchester Conference, which is this Republican conference that was held on Mount Hood over the weekend. It seems like he's feeling the pressure because, Ed Deal went after him a little bit in that debate. And if you look at their body language afterward as they were talking, it almost looks like they were about to come to blows. Clearly not much love lost there. So things are heating up as this race gets underway, and ballots are in the mail right now, so people are going to be voting beginning maybe today. I don't know.
Not looking like a slam dunk for Dudley, but we will see. And we will be back here soon to chat about it. Although, Dirk, you're leaving me to go to southern France, so I'm actually covering this results by myself. Unbelievable.
I can't think of a person who could better or more capably handle the coverage of this race. I will be envious of you from France.
With your baguettes and your beret. All right, this week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded live in the GOP Oil studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien. Our audio engineer is Nalene Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. We will be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.